Welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Namibia. As we continue off with our conversations, the first ever Ministerial Conference of Russia-Africa Partnership Forum concluded in Russia yesterday. This gathering brought together foreign affairs ministers and executives as Russia looks to build on its relation with Africa in a number of areas. Joining us right now just to give us an update on the just concluded forum is our very own presenter right here on Good Morning Namibia, Ndishishii Hamufungu. Ndishishii, good morning.
Good morning, Dapewa. Very good morning to you, the entire team, and of course our wonderful viewers. And in this case, I'm a reporter, not a presenter.
All right. Ndishishii, how's Russia?
Yes, I must say, firstly, we're in the city of Sochi. It's a resort city here in Russia. Of course, a very beautiful place. You have mountains with snow caps in the distance. I did think it would be a little colder than I initially planned for, but the weather has been friendly. It's been ranging between, say, 11 and 17 degrees Celsius every day. And it's really been good. It's a beautiful place, but I haven't got to see much of it, as, of course, the program has been quite tight. And a matter of fact, I am returning today already. So it's been a real in and out situation. Yeah.
All right. Well, Ndishishii, kindly just sum up this first ever Ministerial Conference of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum.
That's right, Napel. Of course, a few years ago, matter of fact, in 2019, Russia hosted the first Russia-Africa Summit, and that took place again last year. Initially, that first conference took place here in the city of Sochi, and the follow-up summit last year took place in St. Petersburg. And during that second summit, the Russia-Africa Partnership looked at new ways, new forms of dialogue between, the continent and the country of Russia. And the thought that it would be ideal to bring it down to a ministerial level and, have dialogues on this level. Of course, we know the power that ministers hold as really the drivers, of policies, the implementers of these policies, etc. And as such, the summit sought to start with a new dialogue. And that took place over this past weekend here in the city of Sochi. We saw some close to 50 African ministers, some close to including executives as well, converge here. We've had about 40 journalists from the continent as well present here covering this massive conference. And this conference, as you rightfully said, really looks at, building on the relations between the continent of Africa and, of course, the country of Russia in a number of areas. You mentioned it, of course, education, science, conflict resolution, etc., development. So that was really the focus of this two-day conference here in Sochi. You know that, of course, Russia and the African continent go way back to the days of the Soviet Union as well, where Russia assisted and aided a lot of African countries who at the time, were still colonized. But since the days of the USSR, as it was known back then, and the dissolution of the USSR, I believe in 91, if memory serves me correct, Russia and the African relations have really sort of, drifted apart. So part of this conference, part of the Russia-Africa Summit, the aim of it is, of course, to bring back and, reforge those relations between the continent and the country of Russia. You know that Russia, of course, also is finding itself at a very peculiar place. And there's this perception that, perhaps Russia is isolated from the rest of the world. But if anything, I think this past weekend is testament that indeed Russia still has friends in Africa.
All right. Ndishishii, this conference comes at a time when the conflict with Ukraine rages on. Kindly just talk to us about that.
Absolutely, Ndapewa. You would remember that in February 2022, of course, this conflict started, and it's been almost 1,000 days and almost 3 years later since this conflict occurred. And since then, we've seen a lot of actions being taken against Russia. We've seen, countries siding with other countries, etc. And it has really brought, great division amongst the world, so to say. What has also happened, in the past 3 years or so is that major sanctions have been placed on Russia. As we speak right now in the Pewa, a lot of the internet sites are blocked, making our work as journalists difficult as well. A lot of, financial services are currently banned here in the country. MasterCards, Visa, for instance, you cannot make use of those here. So you have to travel with cash to here and then, of course, exchange. But these have not only had an impact, on the country of Russia and the people of Russia, but also looking at, of course, how the sanctions and generally the conflict, has impacted the globe. When you look at in Africa, for instance, we see the cost of food going up, wheat, for instance, and that's a result, of this conflict. So in essence, this conflict has not been good for anyone. If I may, in the Pewa, I also had the courtesy of course, engaging our Minister for International Relations and Cooperation on this matter. And his hopes was that, with the incoming president, as President-elect Donald Trump, that, we would see an end to this conflict. President Trump, of course, in the build-up and in the run-up to last week's election, had mentioned that, of course, amongst his priorities is an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We're still not sure how exactly the U.S. will approach that. We know that under the Biden administration, of course, the U.S. has given significant support to Ukraine. But how will that look under the Trump administration? And, of course, the second coming of Trump, we're yet to see. But part of, this alliance with Africa is also to, of course, see how Africa can contribute to the end of this conflict. That Africa has always spoken out about this conflict and the impact that it's had around the globe. So I think, hopefully through dialogue, through platforms such as this, we will see a greater peace around the globe. And that is the thinking of both partners here, the African continent, and of course the country of Russia.
All right. Ndishishii, saying that Namibia also participated in the conference. What was the country's approach to this conference?
Well, seeing Namibia here has always just reminded me of those sentiments of President Gengob when he would say that, Namibia is a product of international solidarity, midwifed by the United Nations. And coming into this conference, that was really the approach of Namibia, the approach of its representative, that's Dr. Peya Moshelenga, who, with a very open mind, of course, spoke about the nostalgic relations between Namibia and Russia. That Namibia itself was a beneficiary of Russian support during the colonial days. Many Namibians came here, were trained here, studied here up until today. Matter of fact, we have about 300 students studying here in Russia across a number of fields, be it engineering, being medicine, etc. So the relations between Namibia and Russia have always been very good. Right. But of course, on top of that, the minister also felt that, as far as we're doing well, as far as diplomacy is concerned, as far as politics is concerned, but there is a strong need to build on our trade relations between Namibia and Russia. And it's starting to take shape. The conversations are there. Matter of fact, Rosatom, I think please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name of that company, but it's one company that's setting up shop in Namibia, looking at mining activities, particularly in the field of uranium. So we're seeing stronger relations between Namibia and Russia. But as Minister Moshelenga rightfully said, we could do better. We could certainly do better in the area of trade.
All right. Ndishishii, as we conclude our conversation this morning, so what's the way forward for Russia-Africa relations?
Yes, during yesterday's closing ceremony, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, of course, showed great appreciation for Africa and participating in this first ever ministerial conference. Of course, they're looking at the way forward. It's still not sure whether this conference would be an annual basis or biannual basis. That is yet to be established. But Minister Lavrov also expressed that, of course, they are ready to continue this dialogue wherever possible. Russia has great interest in Africa. Russia has great potential in Africa. Of course, as I rightfully mentioned earlier on, that Russia is no stranger to Africa. It has assisted a lot of countries and till today still assists a lot of countries across the continent. So there's major commitment from Russia. I think there's major commitment from Africa as well. We also heard from the deputy chairperson of the African Union Commission during yesterday's closing ceremony, and she really highlighted, the potential that Africa has, and of course, how Africa can assist Russia in its endeavors. She also highlighted the progress that Africa has made in the last decade since the adoption of Agenda 2063. That happened about 9 or 10 years ago in 2015. And since then, Africa has really made major inroads. You look at the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're looking at payment solution systems, set up shop for the private sector across the continent. But really, the conflicts on the African continent would perhaps be the biggest challenge. And Russia has also, of course, committed itself to contributing to peace on the continent. And I think with that, we can certainly see real growth, real partnership between Russia and Africa. And what I appreciate is, you would know that there is this sort of tussle for power between this side of the world and the West, as it's known. Russia has repeatedly spoken out against what it terms as neo-colonialism being practiced by the West, which is really, of course, using aid, using the form of loans, etc., to control certain parts of the continent. And that's what Russia is promising not to do. Russia is promising mutual partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships for both the African continent and for Russia. I think, Africa has so much to offer. You look at the free trade area with over $1 trillion, worth over $1 trillion, pardon me. You look at the African population, that's around 1.4 billion. 62% of that 1.4 billion are young people under the age of 25. We know those numbers are certain to grow in the coming years as well, that Africa would really be the hub for labor, for skills, for expertise. So I think, this is a partnership that could really benefit both the continent and also the people of Russia. And yeah, we certainly look forward to better dialogue, to stronger dialogue, and of course, stronger partnerships in the future.
All right. Well, Ndishishii, thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you for that update. And we are awaiting your arrival back here home.
Thank you so much, Ndapewa. I'll bring you one sweet from Sochi.
All right. Thank you so much. NBC reporter Ndishishii Hamufungu joining us, talking to us about the first ever Ministerial Conference of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, which concluded yesterday in Sochi, that is, of course, in Russia. Well, more conversations coming your way, but at 7 o'clock we bring you the news. But for now, let's take a break.